Hey everybody, I'm Philip Barkudorov. Well, this is my team, or I'm in their team, whatever. I'll be presenting Project Alpha for you tonight. So Project Alpha it's a very broad concept. It's not a specific implementation idea for a game, but it's sort of a broad combination of several game design ideas and principles that we put together, and we think they can lead to a good game and a sort of the next level of multiplayer gaming and to good leadership opportunities within a virtual world. And as I said, it's not a specific implementation, so you'll notice there's no story associated with it, there's no specific setting, because we focused entirely on sort of gameplay systems and ideas, which we think can work in many different settings, be it science fiction, fantasy, or anywhere in between. So to begin with, we have a very broad picture of what should this game be if we want leadership in it, if we want really to be able to train people or find out if someone is a good leader, what kind of game environment should we have? So first of all, and this may seem obvious, but a lot of people seem to forget it when developing games, is it must be fun to play. Please don't forget. And basically, the key to remember here is that it has to be fun to play for everybody. The leaders are a very small percentage of the whole population, right? So you have to have a game that is fun for everybody being led as well. If it's not fun, they won't play, and then there will be no one to lead for the people who might be good leaders. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. And also that these people, they don't necessarily have to be IBM players or any particular corporation. It just can be a game for anybody, which happens to be useful for training leadership. You all hear me all right? So secondly, we decided that the game should be a large-scale, free-form MMORPG, so massively multiplayer game. And the reason being, let me explain, is we want to encourage leadership. So how do we do that? Well, the short answer from a game development perspective is almost nothing, because we believe that leadership is an emergent property of people working in groups. When you have groups, they don't succeed unless there is a leader or a group of leaders to keep cohesion and direction and organization. So these leaders will arise naturally when there are groups of people working together. And groups will arise naturally themselves. They're an emergent property of people interacting. People are a self-organizing system. As you can see anywhere in the real world, our whole society is a self-organized system. We, as game developers, all we need to do is give players the tools and the capability to interact with each other and communicate with each other. And basically, the rest will arise from them. And the beauty of this is also that this promotes a very natural form of interaction. When people build this sort of in-game society on their own, it's as they want it to be, as they naturally would do it. So it sort of maps to what might happen in the real world. Or at least the interaction part of it, which is what is important. Leadership is handling people interacting. And those are the skills that map to the real world. The game itself might be about killing monsters with swords or shooting photon torpedoes, but the important part we're looking at is the organization of getting 30 people to go into a dungeon and balance skills and kill a big monster, or organizing 100 people to create a huge space trade route or something like this. So this is the sort of stuff that, independent of setting or independent of story or gameplay, can actually map to the real world. These are the skills we want. And this, I think, answers one of the questions about the EVE Online earlier, that I really think that it's sort of irrelevant what the specific gameplay is, whether it's a heist in the game or whether it's illegal in the game or not. It's the skills of people organizing these ventures that's important. And finally, PvP, or player versus player interaction, is important too, because, well, players are more unpredictable and more interesting generally than AIs. Players are usually adaptive, usually smarter, and so it just creates more interesting gameplay, especially from a leadership perspective, because you have all these, well, intelligent beings to worry about, not just AIs. Next one. Yeah, so now I'll go into a little bit more specific aspects of our design, which they're still not terribly specific, but a little more in depth, a little of the several aspects related to leadership. So first of all, combat is an important part of the game, and not to say that our game, I mean, it's a big part. It's not to say that the game is completely focused on violence, but a lot of people have fun doing this. So it's a good way to engage people in having fun a lot. But the other thing is there are a lot of opportunities for leadership within combat. You know, you can have a group of 5 people going into a dungeon and doing, you know, they have to balance their skills. Someone has to sort of lead them into that. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have, say, 100 players or more, as technology allows. Everything all right?
Yeah, it's cropping off. So I won't see the diagram from the right side.
Well, I'll just keep going. So, so at the other end of the spectrum, you have groups of, say, 100 players or more, as technology might allow, where you really have warfare kind of stuff, you know, and there you really need a hierarchy of leadership. You need, you know, generals and officers and what have you. And you have this whole spectrum, which we kind of broadly termed banditry at the low end and warfare at the high end. So bandits are a group of 5 going into a dungeon or attacking a trade caravan or protecting that trade caravan. And at the high end warfare, you have politics, diplomacy, people attacking each other, and so on.
Can you try making it full screen? Maybe that would solve the problem. Can you show that in a full screen mode?
It is.
No, I mean on the computer.
No. Yeah, second one time.
What's that?
It's different output. So that one is full screen. This is just the presenter view. I don't know if you can get both screens displaying the same.
Okay. Sorry, just suggestion.
Right. So, another big, very important aspect of our game is trade. And basically what we want is a true, or as true as possible, market system. Supply and demand, prices rising and falling. You want to have various resources around the game world where in this place it's scarce, in this place it's abundant, and so on. And so because of the price differences, you really stimulate players moving, players trading, creating trade routes, and exchanging goods and communicating. And then we also want a kind of staged production system. So, for example, first someone needs to create a resource, then someone needs to transport it to a place where they can process the resource. Then you can transport it somewhere else where you can produce it into an item which maybe is sold somewhere else again. And at all stages you can have different players doing these different stages, and they need to communicate. They need to negotiate with each other and really work together to get all this done. And it also has a lot of opportunities for groups to work together because, you know, you can have a trade company that handles transportation or tries to handle the entire process or maybe just one slice of it. And so you have a lot of these interactive possibilities. And again, the more groups we have, the more leaders we will have, the more positions there are or possibilities for people to show off their leadership. Now, excuse me. One of the really cool things that we came up with was cities, which is to say player-governed and player-owned and player-populated cities. So this would be sort of a melting pot of different personalities, different player types. And essentially, you start with a player who wants to build a city or a group of players. They make an investment to place a city somewhere. They choose maybe a layout. And then they can basically sell real estate, sell plots of land, and then set taxation on that land once other players move in. And so afterwards, the governor has to manage tax rates. He can make a profit, or he can attract more people by lowering them. He can improve the city and manage it by, say, building, for example, a city wall to protect it. You know, things like this. And he wants the city to be prosperous, and he wants to attract people to live there, and he has to manage all of these personalities, all the conflicts in his city. He has to improve the city and balance it against this taxation. And so there's a lot of interaction happening. And there's also the social kind of standing that comes with, you know, being the owner of a big city, being the governor of a big city. That's sort of, if it's a tough challenge for a leader, then it's a big deal if you are capable of doing that. People will sort of respect that. Finally, we have diplomacy, which is a bit redundant at this point to talk about because it really permeates everything I've talked about already. But basically, you have it at all levels. You have anywhere from the trade parts of the game where players negotiate, they make deals, they form companies which can compete for trade routes and so on. At the other end of the spectrum, you sort of have politics and maybe a lot of cities interacting. The more you have, the more complex things get. You can have alliances, pacts, and whatever the players come up with. Again, we don't want to implement a very rigid system. We let the players sort of formulate their own relationships. And again, from a leader's perspective, that's another challenge here is that you have to handle all these not just relationships of people in your group, but people of these groups to each other, and not just your group to another group, but the web of all the relationships. You know, maybe your ally is being friendly with your enemy. You know, what are you going to do about that? And so that's another challenge that leaders would have to handle, and another skill that they could learn. Well, to wrap it up, we have this graph, which is, it really only, I mean, it just serves to indicate that everything is tied together. I mean, it's really, no system can exist on its own here. It's all very interconnected. It's a web. You know, combat isn't completely independent of trade or cities. It's all sort of, again, a melting pot of these things. And that's what creates sort of, well, what we hope would be a somewhat natural environment in this virtual world, so that leaders can really exhibit their abilities. Because, again, it's very complex here. As I've shown, there are many different things you have to handle. So if you can handle that, then clearly you have some kind of management abilities, and that's what we're looking for. And you could really try to, you know, you could identify if someone is a good leader, or you could maybe send someone into the game to try to learn something in a week or a month, depending on how long it takes. And on the other nice thing, from my perspective as a gamer, is that I think all of these elements together would make a fun game, not just for leaders, but for anybody, because you have all this very interesting, complex interaction. So from a gamer's perspective, it would also be fun, and that's a great bonus, obviously. So, well, that's basically our concept. So if you have any questions, I'll take them now.
Oh, we got one.
Hi. My question is the following. You have a lot of constructive elements that happen in these worlds leading to, you know, lots of forming of groups. But what I'm missing is a small part, and it counts for all the presentations here, perhaps, so apologies for throwing it at you specifically. There are also negative consequences sometimes when these groups are formed in games, such as some people not being allowed to be part of these groups. You know, they're excluded. Sometimes people decide suddenly to leave these groups and join another. And, you know, there's a lot of loyalty also going on in these groups. And there's lots of negative feelings that can be created. So have you thought about those as well as part of, for example, the responsibilities of a leader?
Well, I think part of the challenge of being a leader in a virtual world is that people join your group voluntarily. You don't pay them. So that's just an extra challenge, which actually makes it a bit harder, I think, in a way, because you have to motivate people. You have to say, well, my group, my guild, or my corporation, whatever it is, it's more fun here than in this other one. And that's just the challenge of a leader, to keep people together. The negative aspects, I mean, well, that's part of competition, you know, it happens. It's unpleasant, but, you know, I mean, it's an unpleasant side effect, I'd say, but at the same time, if people just remember that it's a game, after all, I think it might work itself out. I mean, Eve has a lot of this kind of, it's very PvP, and, you know, you have a lot of this warfare and combat, but somehow, you know, I don't hear about, well, I mean, people have conflicts, but...
So you would say that game leaders have additional qualities, actually, to perhaps leaders in corporate situations?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, because, yeah, you don't pay your corporation or guild members. You have to, and that's, if you translate that to a corporate environment, maybe that's an extra bonus, because, yeah, you can somehow motivate your people in addition to their salaries to say, well, this is a fun place to be, this is a good place to work in.
I'd just like to add one comment to that. Is my experience in virtual worlds is that it's easier for people to help each other, so it tends to happen more often. I mean,
Yeah.
that's more or less in Second Life, but I found a lot of people in the beginning were more than eager to help. I mean, that's also kind of the idea of the web and forums, etc.,
Yeah.
etc.
Well,
It's amazing to me always how many people are willing to do it. And
in
let's say
EVE,
even
you
more
see a
than-
lot of for newbies. Again, you see a lot of people are willing to help.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a lot of griefers running around killing everyone.
No.
It's really somehow it's an interesting side effect again, because I was talking about how we think that this sort of society will arise naturally. So some kind of law and order does prevail eventually. It just some kind of standard will arise.
Yeah, no, I just meant that it seems like there's a lot less exclusion that happens there than in other places. That was my comment. Somebody else? Another question? Yeah. We can pass it along.
Hi, I'm Shirley. I'm a master student at Utrecht University. I was wondering, what were your design motivations to design the avatars in the way you did?
You mean the stick
Yeah.
figures?
Yeah, exactly. Since Chuck Hamilton, he commented on the way people would like to represent themselves in.
Oh well, this is purely purely alpha stage of development. I mean,
They're very
no, this was
stereotypical.
purely.
Because I
I
think
mean,
it's an interesting way actually to think about
Yeah.
representation and
well,
identity.
it could
to have
it could certainly work. You really want to have a. What you want is a lot of detail that people can change, so they can really feel like they've built their own, character. So you could use stick figures if they have a lot of little things that you can alter, right? But I mean, this is not like our final
Alright.
graphics.
Okay, thank you.
I was wondering, I'm Lies van Roesel and I'm studying the Research Master Media Studies. I wonder what exactly sets your game apart from other MMORPGs and what makes it more suitable for learning leadership than, for instance, World of Warcraft or EVE Online?
Well, our design isn't. I wouldn't say it's completely revolutionary. A lot of these systems have been done before. The cities one really hasn't been done to such great extent. But the thing is, a lot of these you would have a game which has one of these systems and not the others. And a lot of EVE has a few of them. World of Warcraft really has, from what I've seen, is a lot about the combat. So you can have those groups of people going into dungeons and such, formulating guilds. There's a bit of the economics, but it doesn't have the freedom of affecting the game world, which is an important aspect. Again, for players to build this society, as it were, to form the game world to themselves, there has to be a lot of this kind of. The game world should allow for players to change it to themselves and to the structures that they themselves create. So that's sort of what our game focuses on. So we instead of saying, well, we only want to make a fun game, we distilled everything that we thought would focus on leadership. So we kind of put it all together in a pot.
So combining everything.
Yeah, and again, it's not so much that we designed our own MMO. It's more like here are these ideas and principles that we think, if you use them, this will lead to what we desire for the leadership.
Great. Anyone else? No? Okay, I guess we're ready to move on. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.